Why is telematics important, right? It's not as a technology trend, but it's about real operational outcomes, right? You want visibility across your remote operations. You want fewer blind spots and the ability at the end of the day to make better decisions, right, with more confidence. So where we are today, and I'll be candid for those of you that are familiar with OpTracker, right? What the current state of things is, right? Where we are with OpTracker and Log365, what's working, what's a bit messy, and the legacy platforms that we're carrying alongside, and the newer foundations that we're building on. Third, what's next? The near-term focus is a little bit more about focusing on stability, streamlining the foundations to build on top of that. We want telematics to be boringly reliable, right? You shouldn't have to worry. Where's the plug? Okay, good. You shouldn't have to worry, right, about the data coming off the machines. You should be able to have confidence in it and use that to make effective decisions. And then, as I said, what comes later, right? The longer term vision, a more unified forestry execution experience, richer analytics, better integration across tools, both Remsoft and your own. So I'm not talking about dates, but just where we're headed. So why does telematics matter, right? You have operations, they're all remote, distributed, often operating in patchy connectivity situations, right? Or no connectivity for a day or days at a time, right? So your coordination, it still relies on old-fashioned methods, radio calls, text calls, end-of-week spreadsheets, right? And that works, it's good enough up to a point. At the same time, your systems are creating an immense amount of data, right? Every day. You've got OEM portals, you have stand4d files coming off of those machines, your GPS tracks, all sorts of information that's already out there, and there's no shortage of it in principle, right? And the real issue is that gap between what's happening in the field and the decisions that you're able to make about that in the office. So scheduling and contractor performance, utilization, that you don't always have the full picture in order to decide what comes next, right? So telematics obviously is the bridge, right, to cross that gap. It's not just about collecting more data, though. We want timely and relevant signals from those machines, and we want those to appear in tools that you're going to actually use, right? So that your supervisors, planners, etc., can act earlier and again with more confidence. Instead of finding out at the end of the week or kind of later in the month what actually happened, right? So better visibility into what's actually happening on the ground, earlier awareness of issues or opportunities to act, and fewer blind spots, right, between the activity in the forest and your own decisions in the office. So that's the framing that I'll kind of use throughout my talk today. So before talking about where we're going, it's important to be honest about why telematics has been a bit of a challenge lately. So the OpTracker story didn't start with Remsoft, right? It evolved over time through FP Innovations with LimGeomatics, and eventually, as you know, into Remsoft. And at each stage, we were solving real problems with the best tools that we had on hand, and within the constraints that were present at that time. And that history matters because it gives us a long product lineage and history. Along the way, we accumulated multiple web applications. Again, for those of you that are familiar, there's FP Track, there's a Lim or Remsoft Tab web app, and there's a Box Plus web app, right? And each of those were built for specific use cases at different times and on different technology stacks. They all, again, delivered real value. But together now we have this overlap, right? There's some inconsistencies, there's complexity, right, that's introduced because of that, to both yourselves and for us internally managing those systems. On the mobile side, we've been carrying forward an older technology, Xamarin, that's end of life, right? It's no longer supported, and we need to transition away from that to a newer model called Flutter. Just yesterday morning, actually, we released the iOS version of the Flutter OpTracker application. So that's now available, and Android and Windows will follow shortly. So that transition, we have to make that transition to be on a modern platform, but it's caused disruptions, right? There's no denying it. And it's meant living in sort of multiple places all at once, right? So all of that to say, the net effect of it is, for a while, we've kind of been operating in a patching the dam mode, right? We haven't really been able to show a lot of forward progress, right? Keeping those legacy systems running, fixing urgent issues as they arise, not necessarily proactively, and managing those multiple overlapping platforms. So that looks like, as I said, sort of a lack of forward progress. You might see some fixes or, again, patches, but there's not really an evolution towards something simpler, more streamlined, more reliable, and a little bit easier to wrap your head around. So I want to acknowledge that off the bat. And what I want to talk about is how we get out of that mode, right, and where we go from here. So we talked about why telematics itself matters and kind of why progress hasn't been so straightforward. But what really separates successful telematics initiatives and efforts from stalled ones is how the data gets used, right? And I think you've probably heard this theme throughout the conversations this week. Where telemetry initiatives are working well, a few things tend to be true, right? The data is trusted. People understand where it came from, what it represents, and how confident they can be in it, right? When you're constantly questioning, and I'm sure you've all been in a similar scenario, when you're questioning the data and the numbers, you're going to hesitate to act on that. You can't make a decision if you don't understand the underlying numbers. And secondly, as I mentioned earlier, right, that data is showing up in places that are usable and make sense to the end users, right? Where those decisions, where and when those decisions are being made, right? Not in a separate portal that you forget your login to, you only go in there once a week or once a month or once a year, right? But it's got to be alongside the tools and workflows that you already have in place. And thirdly, the data drives action, right? It's not just reporting, it's not just numbers, but it helps directly surface issues or opportunities early enough that you can actually respond to it, right? It's a leading indicator as opposed to a trailing one, right? 6 months down the line, finding out that your production was down, that doesn't do anything. It's not going to tell you anything at all, right? So it doesn't become that surprise downstream, right? So yeah, when those conditions aren't in place or we don't have those foundations strong, an initiative based on telemetry data is going to stall or it's going to plateau, right? You can collect a lot of data, but it doesn't meaningfully change how decisions get made. So let's start with where we are today. OpTracker is the more mature of the two products that I'm talking about today. Many are using it today, hundreds of machines to drive real value, right? It's built on Esri's technology, which makes it sort of machine agnostic, right? It can go into multiple machine regardless of OEMs. And its real focus is operational awareness and maps, right? Giving operators spatial awareness and in the office into where work has happened and what's left through those GPS tracks, calculating depletions and things like geonodes. It's definitely meant to be used in an offline context, right? Given the connectivity, we don't always have an active connection to see real-time data or sync information, but they can crews can keep working, obviously, without a live connection and then come back and sync that information when they can. So those are all solid fundamentals in active use today, right? On the mobile side, as I mentioned, there's a big shift, right? We've released this new Flutter-based iOS app with the others to follow shortly. Happy to show you that in more detail if you want to come visit. Kiana and I think, are over there with Apple tablets to show you. It looks very similar. The flow is meant to be relatively identical. There's just some polish to it, a little bit more modern. And that gets us onto a better platform that we can evolve on, right? As opposed to, again, patching the legacy system. And I did mention the web apps, right? It's important to acknowledge that reflects the history, right? FP Track, Tab, and Boxplus are all still in active use for a few different use cases. There's still, again, real value in them, but they're built on at different times. They don't always behave predictably or exactly in the same way. We need to address that. So you have a strong map-centric field view and supervisor workflows. We have a new mobile app foundation, and we have a set of web applications that work but are a little bit complex. That's where we are today. Where OpTracker focuses on field execution and spatial context, Log365's role today is a little bit narrower and very deliberate. So its primary job is to move Stanford D data reliably from the machines to the office and vice versa. So today, we automate the transfer of APT or cutting instructions to the machines and production files from the machine computer to the office. The application handles, queuing, retry queues, file life cycles on the machine. So, if you don't have a connection, it will pick back up when it can. It doesn't just drop the data and forget about it. And it gets some basic status and logging visibility so that you can understand, what's happening on the machine and when things arrive from which machine. For those that are using it, there are not a large number, but a number of machines. There are some practical improvements around, not having to go out to the machine with a USB key to update instructions or to pull that information off of the machine. A bit more visibility into when is this information coming in. I don't know what happened on this machine. I'm missing this file, right? You don't have to again go out to the machine. And you can leverage the files downstream, right? So we do convert the production file into a CSV that's provided by email, and you can import that into your own systems to build reporting on top of. I do want to be clear to you about what Log365 is not yet doing, right? It's just, at this point, it's really just a transport layer, right? It gets files and information to and from the machine. The interpretation of the data, analytics, reporting, that idea of, great, I've got my data, what do I do next? That still happens downstream. It's not really what we're doing with Log365 today, but that's one of the more exciting things that I want to talk about. So right now, it's a reliable automated file transfer service. It's designed for those low connectivity forestry environments, and it's getting that data out of the forest intact. So next, what comes next? Looking ahead at the near term for OpTracker, we're not really trying to introduce a whole wave of new concepts and shiny new features, right? It's about taking the foundations that are in place and making them solid, predictable, and reliable, right? There are three main threads to that work. The first is, stabilizing, refining the mobile experience, making sure that we do that cross-platform. Again, that was a necessary move to get to a new platform, and so we want to work on enhancements there, minor enhancements, improving performance, just making sure that that mobile platform behaves consistently, reliably, with minimal disruption to operators. Secondly, we want to improve the Box Plus web application, which is really the platform, the web platform of the future for OpTracker. So making it easier for supervisors and managers to set things up, the configuration of machine information and those that use it, data loggers, really bringing the threads of those three platforms on the web, FPTrack, the Tab web app, together, right? So that you're not relying on multiple systems. So we're trying to collapse that and simplify. And overall, that means reducing the surprises across those platforms, right? So as I said, they can behave a little bit differently, or there's one report you can get over here, but not quite over here yet. So really trying to make that those threads come together, make it more stable, predictable, and just easier to live with for both you and for us, right? I know from our team internally, they would love nothing more. So all of that is, again, strengthening the foundations of telematics, so that work will stick and we can build exciting things on top of that. So shifting to Log365, we want to build on that reliable transport layer turn it into a much stronger telemetry backbone that kind of is the way we see us going longer term. So there are 3 priorities here. We want to make sure that the system as it currently exists is strengthened so that we're handling the files properly. We have real visibility, into every step of the transfer process so that we can audit, is it a connection issue? Is it a machine configuration issue? Is it our software? Is it satellite? Is it something downstream, right? And just monitoring that so we can understand what's happening and why. Better status reporting as a whole, right? We don't want to be guessing as to why or why not a file has arrived. And secondly, we're deepening the normalization and making sure that we're supporting multi-fleet or all OEMs, right? Many of you have mixed fleet scenarios and you can use the OEM software. But with Stand4D, we want to take that from multiple sources, standardize it, normalize it, and present it in a way that you can actually use that cross-platform, cross OEM. Regardless, so we want clear signals from Log365, regardless of where that information came from. And then lastly, that's partially building into then the groundwork for deeper analytics, right? Business intelligence and integrations with both our own tools and your own. So stable schemas, APIs, and predictable data structures, right? Now, we're not starting from scratch here because Stand4D has a structure to it, so we're going to leverage that. But, it's turning it into a source of data that can be incorporated into a variety of different tools. So Log365 next isn't about jumping straight into dashboards or kind of the end state of that data, but it's about making a strong foundation, a scalable foundation that you can have confidence in, that's explainable, right? You know exactly where your data is and what it looks like. So you've probably picked up on these themes already, but in the near term, what's next across telematics in general, right? Is summarized here, right? Reliability, so that ensuring that the tools are dependable, that you don't have to think about, whether or not it's going to function in tough conditions or low connectivity forestry conditions. Data needs to move when and how it should, and those workflows should be predictable. And secondly, confidence, so ensuring you can trust and that you can explain the data. So again, normalizing that across mixed fleet, keeping audit trails, making clear what's the freshness of the data, near real time versus reconciled, and things like that. And then the ultimate outcome is driving those better decisions, right? Making it easier to see what's happening now, forecast production, spot downtime or maintenance needs, so that you can act faster upon that and with more certainty, right? Before you don't necessarily need advanced analytics for that, but that's something that we can start to enable and provide value in the near term. So investing in a foundation that's robust, trustworthy, and that makes every downstream use case much easier later on. So with those foundations covered, I want to talk a little bit, broader and sort of longer term where we're headed. There's a couple of different ways that I frame this, and I like to think of these two streams here in particular at scale. These two complementary streams, right? Rather than trying to treat all these data sources the same. On one side, we have sort of near real-time telemetry, right? These are lighter weight, frequent signals to help answer questions like, where are my machines right now or today, right? Are they working? Are they stopped? What's happening right now in the field, right? And in this case, it's great to leverage things like maps or a status dashboard, exception alerts, things like this. It's about day of execution or, almost day of execution. It's about helping those supervisors, the actual operations teams, react quickly, right? On the other side, you have more reconciled or certainly more authoritative sources. That's more like the validated Stand4D production data or operational monitoring data. You're using that for downstream reporting, planning, payments, right, and overall reconciliation before you're necessarily waiting for the final data coming from the mill. It may arrive less frequently, but it goes through much more validation, and it's something you can stand behind, right? The important thing to note is, these streams serve slightly different purposes, but they need to remain aligned, right? And so if you think about the two products that I'm referring to today, we look at OpTracker as a little bit more in that near real-time category in the Stanford D or the Log365, and in a little bit more reconciled or authoritative realm. Another way to think about the longer-term direction of what we're trying to achieve with telematics data is this idea of a forestry execution loop, right? So on the field side, those machines are working, the crews are working, and OpTracker is providing them with real-time, spatial context, their blocks, constraints, alarms, tracks, etc. And telemetry data is being generated through that and on the machines themselves, right? As the wood is cut. So that flows into a telemetry foundation, which is our back end, right? And that information is ingested, normalized, we manage it. And that's where we deal with things like, file transformation, normalization, and start to build, we can build the foundation so you can have trust in the data. And there we want to feed it into analytics tools and planning tools. So whether that's our own or data warehouses or your BI tools, it's wherever you're looking at progress, production data, utilization, and performance. And the critical though step is that last one, right? So those insights, we don't want them to just sit in a report on somebody's desktop, but they need to feed back into field execution through updated plans, new cutting instructions, different assignments, and the like. So the goal over time here with telemetry is to make that loop tighter and easier to work with. Less friction in moving data around from place to place, more consistent models over time, and clear connections between what's happening in the forest and again, your decision-making processes. This is, at a high level where we're headed. We want to be unified in outcomes, but modular in delivery. And again, I'm sure you picked up on some of this in the broader product vision that Grant presented yesterday and how we've been talking about the new Remsoft. OpTracker, in this case, continues to be that operational monitoring or execution surface, right? It's what you're using day to day in the cab of your machines. And Log365 evolves into a really strong authoritative telemetry foundation, responsible for ingesting, normalizing, and serving up very detailed machine data consistently. So we, looking at a shared telematics model across that, while maintaining some separation between those two streams of data. Gives us clearer idea of ownership, where telemetry data lives, and we can adopt different functionalities incrementally rather than trying to make a big change all at once. So it's not about collapsing it all into a single tool right away, but it's about building the foundation so that we can eventually work in that direction, right? Multiple tools depending on your use cases, your needs, but they plug in together and they play well nice together. Excuse me. I did want to provide an example here, and I think yesterday this came up as Kevin Lim's one of his proudest examples, right, was the Forest Machine Connectivity Project. And I just wanted to give this as an example of what's possible. So this is a multi-year deployment where many of the concepts around telematics data have come together in practice, right? So in FMC, OpTracker provides field-level visibility and spatial context, right, to the operators in the field. And then we have a telemetry foundation that pulls that data in and manages machine data from several hundred machines across multiple contractors and regions. And then that feeds into planning and analytics, right, where teams can see progress, inventory utilization, and performance over time. So as a graph here, you can see the different stages of harvest coming off of the machines, using that data to put it together into an excellent visible report. So you get earlier visibility into the progress and things like roadside inventory. You can see the phase-based progress and see utilization patterns across different machines, fleets, and contractors enact on them. I do want to be clear, this isn't a shrink-wrapped product, it's just an example. It's a program and a partnership that we have in place with a few key accounts. So yeah, it's just a useful, it's a useful proof point of what becomes possible when we have all of these foundations in place to build on. So I'll sort of close out here with a longer-term view of where we're headed. As the foundations mature, we've got three broad themes that we're aiming for. So the first one would be around the Log365 and turning it into a real analytics platform, right? Really standard ways of working with that data, common views around production, downtime, utilization, alongside APIs and documentation so that your teams can build on top of that foundation rather than starting from raw files or from disparate solutions all the time. And I've heard that there are many different ways, or people are doing their own thing on how to get that data out of the field and then transform it into something usable. So our goal is for Log365 to become that single source of truth for Stanford-based data. Secondly, we want to be able to surface that information, yes, within our own ecosystems, right? And so our team is constantly discussing, well, if we had this data point here and if we connected it there, so the one real concrete example that Mike and I are continually talking about is the harvest actuals in Remsoft operations. So we have estimates in operations, and then that data, the job gets sent off and the crews are working in the forest. And then you have to manually enter your actuals after the fact in Remsoft operations. But we have that data. We have that information through Log365 because we know exactly what that machine cut and the volume of those stems. So connecting those dots and again, feeding that back into the upstream system so that you can see that in, not just have estimates, but have real data, hard data in there. Back to kind of the earlier stages of what I was talking about is a question-driven approach to insights and value, right? It's not about what data we have or, are we collecting the data? It's asking specific questions of it, right? What's at roadside? What resources are being underutilized? And how does performance vary from region to region or contractor to contractor? So this is the broad direction. I don't have a list of specific features that I'm sharing at this time. As I said, we spent a lot of time sort of patching the dam, getting to a place where we can have the capacity to look forward. And I'm really excited for what's coming in the telematics space, in particular with the Log365 analytics, building that out in a way that's going to conform and sort of align to the new vision for what we have here at Remsoft and the Connected Forest platform.